Okay, so in the second video, we're going to deal with some more complicated problems as far as dealing with your radicals go. But we've kind of covered all the basics that you need to know when you are solving these. So, first thing, steps to solve radicals. The absolute first step that you have to do is you have to make sure that the root is by itself. If you don't like the word isolate the root, okay, you can mark it out. We've got to get the root by itself. Okay, if you want to put it in other terms, get the root by itself. After we do that, we need to square it to get rid of a square root. We haven't done one yet, but we will in this video. There might be a cubed root, which would mean you would have to cube it. There could be a fourth root, a fifth root, or a sixth root. If there's a fourth root, you would have to take it to the fourth power, okay, and so on. You just have to make sure that you are using the inverse of those. Once you get rid of the root, you are simply going to solve for x. Okay, and then the most important one, and this is different than any other problem that we've had to do, you must check your solution at the end of these. Okay, so we've got x plus 1 equals square root of 2x plus 10. Step 1, we have to get the root by itself. And it is. The root is on the right side. It's the only thing on the right side with it. So, to get rid of the root, and it's a square root, we are going to need to square it, which is great. However, on this side, we've now got a different issue, okay? Because I have an x plus 1 squared, which I need to remember literally means x plus 1 times x plus 1, okay? So I am actually going to have to FOIL on this one. And remember when I told you guys that you weren't going to get away from factoring? Well, here comes your factoring that you're going to have to do. On the right side, I have a square root of 2x plus 10, and I've squared it. So that will get rid of the square root for me. So I'm left with just a 2x plus 10. Okay? We still need to do a little simplifying on the left side of this here. I'm going to have to FOIL. X times x gives me x squared. X times 1 gives me a 1x. 1 times x gives me a 1x. 1 times 1 gives me 2. And I still have a 2x plus 10. Okay? I end up then with x squared plus 2x plus 2. Oh, that does not equal 2. Gosh, sorry guys. 1 times 1 definitely equals 1. My bad. Okay, so I have an x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals a 2x plus 10. Now, how are we going to solve this problem here? And there's one key thing that we need to notice when we see this. Okay, and the key thing is the fact that we have an x squared and an x. The only way that you can solve a problem with an x squared and an x is you are going to have to factor. So in order to solve this problem, we are going to have to factor. Now, before I can factor, however, I have to remember that this equation must equal 0. So the first thing that I have to do is I have to move this 2x over, and I have to move this 10 over so that I can factor. When I do that, that gives me an x squared. My x's actually end up canceling, and a positive 1 and a negative 10 gives me a minus 9 equals 0. So I end up with x squared minus 9 equals 0. Okay, now, on this one, since the x is canceled, I actually could just move the 9 over and square root it, okay? But a lot of us forget to do the plus or minus when we do that, so I like to think of this x squared minus 9 equals 0. Remember, that's a difference of squares, which means that I have an x plus 3 times an x minus 3 equaling 0, okay? Some of you guys, when you were doing this problem here, would have made it x squared plus 0x minus 9. So what factors of 9 subtract to give me 0? Well, 3 and 3 would. Okay, so some of you guys will remember it that way. Regardless, though, I've got this thing factored now. It's x plus 3 times x minus 3. So I'm going to need to set each of those equal to 0. And I get x equals negative 3, and I get x equals 3. Okay, can I circle those answers? No. Because remember, we have to check both of these answers before we can say that they are correct. So the first one I have is a negative 3 plus 1 equals the square root of 2 times negative 3. Whoops. 2 times negative 3 plus 10. Okay. And then I also need to check a 3 plus 1 equals square root of 2. Whoops, didn't need that parentheses there. Sorry, I'm struggling, guys. 2 times 3 plus 10. Okay, so negative 3 plus 1 gives me a negative 2 equals 2 times a negative 3 gives me a square root of negative 6 plus 10. Negative 2 equals the square root of 4. And that is not true because the square root of 4 is a positive 2. Okay, so negative 3 is not an answer for this problem. Let's go and check the other one. 3 plus 1 is 4 equals square root of 6 plus 10. 4 equals the square root of 16. That one is true. Okay, so x equals 3 is a solution. So this problem only has one solution for it. Okay, on the next slide here, we want to solve the problem square root of 9x plus 18 plus 2 equals x. If I have corrected the mistake on the notes, that's awesome for you. If I have not corrected the mistake on the notes, scribble out that problem and then put this problem down here for you. So on this one here, pause it if you want to try it on your own. You might want to wait a sec before you do, because this one does have one additional step, which is different from the previous one. And hopefully you guys can look at this and see our square root is not isolated. So the first thing that we need to do on this one is we're going to have to get that square root by itself. So the first thing that I would need to do here would be to subtract both sides by 2, which would give me my square root of 9x plus 18 equaling an x minus 2. Okay, I cannot combine that x and that 2 because they're not like terms. Okay, now I do have my square root by itself, so you may want to pause the video, see if you guys can get the answers on your own here. Okay, I'm going to square both sides because I've got to get rid of that square root, which when I do that gives me a 9x plus 18 equals, remember x minus 2 literally means x minus 2 times x minus 2. Okay, so I've got a 9x plus 18 equals, I've got a FOIL here, x times x is x squared, negative 2, x times negative 2 gives me a negative 2x, and then negative 2 times x gives me another negative 2x. So those two negative 2x's combine together to give me a negative 4x, and then I have a negative 2 times a negative 2, which gives me a positive 4. Okay, much like the last problem here, I should see something that should trigger something in my head here. I see an x squared and an x. And if I see an x squared and an x, the only way that I can solve this problem is by factoring. But before I can factor, I have to make sure that it equals 0. So I need to get this negative, or this 9x, I need to move it to the other side. So I would subtract by 9x. And I need to get rid of this positive 18. So I will subtract by 18. So that cancels these on this side. And I am left with 0 equals x squared minus 13x minus 14. And again, I have an x squared and an x. The only way that I can solve a problem with an x squared and an x is by factoring. Okay, so I'm going to need to figure out 1 times 14. I need factors of 14 that will subtract to give me 13. Well, what is 14 minus 1? Well, that gives me 13. So 1 and 14 are going to be my factors. X squared, 14x, 1x, minus 14. Okay. I've got a negative 13 there, so I'm going to need a negative 14 and then a plus 1. Negative 14 plus 1 would combine to give me a negative 13. What can I pull out of these two here? Well, I can pull out an x. Leaves me with an x minus 14. What can I pull out of these two here? I can't pull anything out. There's nothing in common. But we can always pull a 1 out. And that leaves me with an x minus 14. So my two factors are x plus 1 and x minus 14. Now remember, it's been equaling 0 this whole time here. So I've got 0 equals x plus 1 and 0 equals x minus 14. I get negative 1 equals x, and I get 14 equals x. Can I go ahead and circle those for my answer? No, you cannot. We have to check them. So coming back up to my original problem here, square root of, that's probably too big of a square root, 9 times negative 1 plus 18, okay, plus 2 equals that negative 1. Okay, so I plugged in negative 1 for both of my x's. That gives me a square root of 9 times negative 1 is negative 9 plus 18. Negative 9 plus 18 gives me a positive 9. So I get the square root of 9 plus 2 equals negative 1. 3 plus 2 does not equal negative 1. So negative 1 is not one of my answers. Okay, test my other. Square root of 9 times 14 plus 18 plus 2 equals my x, which is 14. 9 times 14, 9 times 4 is 36. 9 times 10 is 90, so that would be 126 plus 18 plus 2 equals 14. 126 plus 18 would give me 144. Square root of 144 plus 2 equals 14. Square root of 144 is 12 plus 2 equals 14. That is true. So 14 is one of my answers. Okay, so we are good on that one there. Last two examples we have should move fairly quickly. This one here, again, we've got to isolate our root. We have to isolate our root. So the first thing I've got to do is I've got to subtract by 3 on both sides. Notice that this is the cubed root of x plus 1 equals 2. Okay, cubed root of x plus 1 equals 2. So how do I get rid of a cubed root? Well, to get rid of a cubed root, I would have to cube it. Okay, and when I cube it, I end up with just my x plus 1 equals 8. Last thing I need to do here, subtract both sides by 1, and I get that x equals 7. And I'm going to circle my answer. But wait, Mr. Schieber, you didn't check that one. Fun fact, when you are dealing with an odd root, you don't have to check, because our odd roots look like this. We have no domain concerns with our odd roots. Okay, so anytime you have an odd root, you do not have to check. It is only your even roots that you have to check on. So that is kind of nice, and I saved that for the end just for a surprise for you guys. Odd roots, you can just circle your answer. Okay, next one, and this is the final one. Okay, we have x minus 2 in parentheses to the 1/4 power equals 1. Okay, couple things. One thing you guys might want to remember with your jam, okay, if something is to the 1/4 power, remember 4 is your j, okay, my a in this case is x minus 2, and that x minus 2 is to the first power. So really, that 1/4 power there just means that this is the 4th root of x minus 2. So you may want to just rewrite this as the 4th root of x minus 2 equals 1. Okay? Or you can just leave it as that fraction. Regardless, the fact that that is a 4th root, to get rid of it, I'm going to have to take it to the 4th power. The 4th power will get rid of the 4th root for me. Gives me an x minus 2 equals 1 to the 4th power is just 1. I am going to then add 2 to both sides. Gives me x equals 3. Can I circle that answer? No. You cannot circle that answer because this is an even root. So even roots we must check. Okay? So the 4th root of 3 minus 2 equals 1. That is the 4th root of 3 minus 2 is just 1 equals 1. So the 4th root means I need something times itself times itself times itself to give me that answer. Well, 1s are pretty easy to deal with because the 4th root of 1 is just 1. And 1 does equal 1. So x equals 3 is the answer for that one there. Okay? And that is it for solving equations with our roots.